I was determined my son's first summer venture would be a success. Then the HOA president plowed her SUV through his stand and grazed him. They believed a fabricated paper trail and intimidation made them invincible. But they never anticipated the neighbors had recorded everything, and we discovered her erasing the evidence. It was leverage I planned to use to end her reign and build a legal case. Before we get into it, share your own encounters with a difficult neighbor in the comments. I'm Jim Pard, the head of the HOA at Grandison Estates. She drove her vehicle at my 8-year-old. She smashed the stand and brushed against my boy, then hid behind regulations. Stay with me. We transformed paperwork into prison time. It all began with a photo of lemonade, 2 bags of sugar, and the ingenious, if slightly syrupy, business plan of my 8-year-old son, Kelvin. The July sun was relentless, the kind of heat that softens pavement and makes the air waver over the immaculate lawns of Grandison Estates. Our community wasn't just a collection of houses. It was a declaration of status. Every yard was a perfect emerald rectangle. Every mailbox stood at rigid attention, and the HOA enforced its covenants with religious fervor. The monarch of this floorless, slightly terrifying kingdom was Carol Jenkins, fueled by green smoothies and an insatiable need for control. My son, however, was blissfully oblivious. His world was simple. He wanted to sell lemonade. We assembled a small folding table at the foot of our driveway, featuring a brightly painted sign that declared, "Kelvin's Lemonade, 50cc, jokes included." My wife, Tina, the strategic mastermind of our family, had helped him with the sign. She's the calm, tech-savvy anchor to my stubborn, sarcastic nature. While I was prepared to debate a fence post, Tina could diffuse any conflict with a single, perfectly delivered, dry remark. Kelvin had her intelligence and my tenacity, in combination that filled me with pride and a deep concern for his future educators. He sat on a small stool, a tiny captain of industry in a superhero t-shirt, his face glowing with the pride of a new entrepreneur. Business was thriving. Neighbors stopped by, disarmed by his sincere sales pitch. With each cup, he'd deliver a truly awful knock-knock joke, and people would chuckle, handing him $1 and telling him to keep the change. It was a perfect summer moment, the kind you tuck away for a gloomy day. Then, around 2 in the afternoon, the trouble arrived in the form of Chad Jenkins, Carol's 15-year-old son. Chad was the embodiment of teenage privilege, a lanky kid with a permanent look of disdain. He ambled up to the stand with 2 friends who seemed equally unimpressed with existence. Kelvin, ever the professional, straightened his imaginary tie. "Welcome to Kelvin's Lemonade. Can I interest you in a cup?" he chirped. "It's very cooling." Chad glanced dismissively at the setup. "Yeah, whatever. Give us 3. Kelvin carefully poured 3 cups, the plastic condensation in the heat. He lined them up. "That will be $1.50, please," he said, extending a small, slightly grimy hand. Chad smirked, grabbing a cup without paying. "Put it on my account," he said, his voice oozing condescension. His friends snickered. I was observing from the garage, pretending to sort tools, but really just soaking in my son's big day. My grip tightened on a wrench. Piece of principle. My internal monologue was already debating a preemptive strike. Kelvin, my brave little man, held his ground. He didn't cry or retreat. He just looked Chad directly in the eye. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice small but firm. "We don't offer credit. The sign says 50 cents. Chad rolled his eyes with a dramatic, full head motion. "Seriously, it's lemonade, kid. My mom manages this entire neighborhood. You should be giving it to me for free." He took a long, loud slurp, then tossed the half-empty cup onto our grass. "Tastes sour anyway." I started forward, the wrench feeling heavy in my hand, but before I could intervene, Tina's calm voice cut through the tension from the porch. "Chad, I believe you dropped something." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to, and had a specific frequency that could halt a charging elephant. Chad froze, looked at the cup, then at Tina, then at his friends, who were suddenly fascinated by their shoes. He muttered something unintelligible, kicked a loose stone, and stalked off down the street, his friends trailing behind like dejected puppies. Kelvin looked a little shaken but triumphant. He had confronted the local bully and prevailed. I knelt and gave him a high five. "You handled that like a pro, buddy." He puffed out his chest. "He didn't pay," Kelvin stated, his brow furrowed with the outrage of a swindled shopkeeper. "Some people," I said, ruffling his hair, "just don't recognize a quality product." We laughed it off, but I saw the curtain move in the Jenkins window across the street. A cold dread settled in my stomach. This wasn't over. Carol Jenkins didn't just dislike rule breakers. She despised anyone who didn't acquiesce to her will. And my 8-year-old had just refused to yield. The lemonade was about to become a lot more costly for everyone. The tranquility of our summer afternoon had been fractured. I had a sinking feeling the battle for Granderson Estates had just commenced, all over 50 cents worth of sugary drink. The next 2 days were a masterclass in passive aggression, Jenkins style. We received an email from the HOA CCing the entire neighborhood. Of course, offering a friendly reminder that all temporary commercial structures, including but not limited to beverage dispensers, required approval from the Architectural Review Committee. The email included a link to a 20-page application form demanding notarized signatures and a soil composition report. I laughed out loud. Tina, reading over my shoulder, just raised an eyebrow. Soil composition? Is she worried Kelvin's stand will cause a sinkhole? I drafted a sarcastic reply inquiring if a lemonade stand also required an environmental impact study. But Tina, ever the strategist, deleted it before I could send it. "Don't provoke the hornet's nest, Jim," she cautioned. "Let's just see what she does." So we ignored it. Kelvin went right back out the next day, and business was even better. People were stopping by specifically to support him, having heard about Chad's performance. It was becoming a tiny, delightful act of rebellion. Old Mr. Henderson bought an entire pitcher and saluted Kelvin. The support felt good, but every time a car slowed, I'd glance toward the Jenkins house, expecting to see Carol marching over with a clipboard and a decibel meter. On the third day, she stopped being passive. It was late afternoon, the sun beginning to dip and cast long shadows. Kelvin was packing up for the day. He had a cash box full of earnings and a smile that could illuminate a small town. I was in the driveway with him, helping count the day's take. Tina was on the porch with her laptop, probably remotely accessing a weather satellite or something equally impressive. That's when I heard it. Not the gentle hum of a neighbor's car, but the aggressive, guttural roar of a large engine pushed too hard. I looked up and saw it, Carol Jenkins' pristine white, full-size SUV. It turned off the main street and swung into our driveway. Not slowly, not cautiously, but with a terrifying surge of speed. There was no hesitation. It was aimed directly at the little folding table. My brain struggled to process the surreal, insane scene. The roar of the engine was real. The sun glinting off the windshield was real. And the look on Carol's face, a tight, vicious mask of fury, was very, very real. Kelvin was standing right beside the table, his back to the approaching vehicle, counting his quarters. Time seemed to warp, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm of pure, primal fear. I screamed his name. "Kelvin, move!" He turned, his eyes wide with confusion, just as the massive chrome grille bore down on him. I didn't think. I reacted. I shoved him as hard as I could, sending him stumbling sideways onto the grass, out to the direct path. He fell in a heap, scraped but safe. In the same motion, I threw myself forward, not at the driver, but at the front of the vehicle itself. It was still moving, its tires crunching over the edge of the lawn, where the stand had been moments before. There was a sickening crack of splintering wood and the shatter of a glass pitcher as the SUV's front bumper annihilated Kelvin's entire business. Lemonade and ice cubes sprayed across the concrete. The hand-painted sign crumpled like a wounded bird. The front tire clipped the table leg, sending it spinning, and then the vehicle kept coming, right at me. I brought both hands down on the hood with every ounce of my strength. The impact was jarring, a deep metallic thud that echoed down the quiet street. My palms and wrists screamed in protest, but the shock of it, the sheer audacity of a person physically striking her car, seemed to penetrate whatever reptilian part of Carol's brain was in charge. The SUV lurched to a halt, the engine dying. The front bumper was less than 6 inches from my legs. For a moment, there was absolute silence, broken only by the ticking of the engine and my ragged breathing. "Kelvin, squeeze my hand," I said. He did. I breathed. Kelvin started to cry, a mixture of fear and the heartbreak of seeing his hard work destroyed. I looked at Carol through the windshield. Her face was pale, but her eyes blazed with self-righteous fire. She wasn't horrified. She wasn't apologetic. She was livid. The driver's door flew open and she stormed out. Not to check on my son, not to ask if I was okay, but to point a trembling, accusatory finger at the wreckage. "You see?" she shrieked, her voice sharp and piercing. "This is an unapproved structure. It's a hazard. It violates Section 7, Paragraph C of the Covenants. You people are a menace." I stared at her dumbfounded. My son was on the ground crying. His little business was a pile of splinters. And she was quoting the HOA rulebook. That's when I knew this was no longer a neighborhood disagreement. This was war. The sound of sirens cut through Carol Jenkins' unhinged rant about covenants and property values. Someone had called the police. And judging by the number of neighbors now on their lawns, it could have been any of them. 2 cruisers pulled up, their lights painting the scene in strobing red and blue. Carol immediately shifted gears, transforming from a shrieking harpy into a trembling, terrified victim. The performance was instantaneous and chillingly effective. She clutched her chest, her voice cracking as she pointed a shaky finger at me. "Officer, thank heavens. This man, he attacked me. He tried to assault me. I was just pulling into my driveway across the street, and he ran into the road, screaming, and started pounding on my car." I just stared, my mouth agape. The sheer, bald-faced audacity of the lie was breathtaking. My son was still sniffling on the grass, his knee bleeding. The remains of his stand were scattered across my driveway. And I was the aggressor. A young officer, probably not much older than Chad, approached me cautiously. "Sir, I need you to step over here and tell me what happened." His partner, an older, wearier cop, went to talk to Carol. Tina had already scooped up Kelvin and was holding him on the porch, murmuring soothing words and examining his scraped knee. She met my eyes over the officer's shoulder, her expression a mix of fury and absolute calm. It was her "we will obliterate them" look, and it was one of the reasons I loved her so much. I took a deep breath, pushing down the adrenaline and rage making my hands shake. "Officer," I said, keeping my voice steady. "That woman, Carol Jenkins, intentionally drove her car up my driveway at high speed. She aimed it at my 8-year-old son and his lemonade stand. I pushed him out of the way and struck her hood to make her stop. She almost killed him." The young cop scribbled in his notepad, his face unreadable. "She claims you ran at her car." "She's lying," I stated flatly. "Look at the scene. The wreckage is on my property. The tire tracks are on my lawn. Why would I run into the street to attack her car in my own driveway?" The older officer ambled over, leaving Carol to her dramatic retelling. He looked from me to the crushed stand, to the tire marks veering onto the grass. He knelt and picked up a piece of Kelvin's hand-painted sign. He didn't speak for a long moment, just absorbed the scene. Then he walked to the front of Carol's SUV. "Ma'am," he said, his voice calm but firm, "there are 2 distinct fingerprints here on the hood. They're facing forward, consistent with someone trying to stop the car from moving toward them, not someone attacking it from the side." Carol's face tightened. "Well, I was scared. I might have rolled forward by accident after he startled me." The officer nodded slowly. "Right, an accident." He then turned and started speaking to the gathered neighbors. Mr. Henderson was practically vibrating with indignation. Mrs. Whitaker, from next door, was already showing the young officer a video on her phone. The narrative Carol was trying to build was crumbling before it even started. They placed me in the back of a cruiser to take my official statement. It was humiliating, sitting behind the cage like a criminal while my son watched from the porch. They read me my rights, a standard procedure that still felt like a punch to the gut. I recounted everything, from Chad's "put it on my tab" comment to the final, terrifying charge of the SUV. My voice cracked only when I described pushing Kelvin to safety. After about 20 minutes, the older officer opened the door. "All right, Mr. Pard, you can step out." I got out, my legs shaky. "What's happening?" He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. Your statement is logged as defense of others. You're not being charged. We've got multiple witness statements and at least 2 video angles that back your story. It's clear you acted to protect your child. Relief, so potent it made me dizzy, washed over me. So you're arresting her? The officer's face soured. That's where it gets complicated. She's claiming it was an accident, that her foot slipped. Without proof of intent, charging her with assault with a deadly weapon is tough. The DA might not go for it. My heart sank. Are you kidding me? You saw what she did. I know what I saw, he said, his voice low. And what I see is a classic he said, she said with a pile of wood in the middle. For now, we're writing it up as a traffic incident. For insurance, we'll have to cover the damages. If new evidence shows intent, that changes things. He handed me a card with a case number. But I'm telling you, Mr. Pard, watch your back. People like her don't just let things go. As the police cars pulled away, Carol stood in her driveway, arms crossed, a smirk of pure, unadulterated triumph on her face. She hadn't been arrested. She hadn't even gotten a ticket. In her mind, she had won. She had faced the law and come out on top. That look told me everything I needed to know. The cops might have closed their report, but Carol Jenkins was just getting started. The first official salvo from the HOA arrived in our mailbox less than 48 hours later. It was a formal notice of violation. The letter, signed by Carol Jenkins as HOA president, fined us $200 for maintaining a public nuisance, another $100 for unauthorized commercial activity, and $50 for improper driveway usage. To add insult, there was a handwritten note at the bottom in Carol's spiky script. Prompt payment is appreciated to avoid further penalties. I crumpled the letter and threw it across the kitchen. Can you believe this woman? She tries to run over our son, and now she's invoicing us for it. Tina calmly retrieved the paper, smoothed it out, and scanned it with her phone. It's a scare tactic, Jim. She thinks she can bury us in fines and red tape until we capitulate. She tapped her laptop. She's trying to build a paper trail to paint us as problematic residents. Well, 2 can play at that game, I grumbled, already composing a blistering email. But Tina held up a hand. No, we're not going to play her game. We're going to play ours. A slow, dangerous smile spread across her face. She thinks the regulations are her weapon. But she's forgetting something. They build the systems that run the regulations. Tina's day job was in cybersecurity. The HOA had security cameras covering the main entrance and park, pointing down our street. Carol controls that feed. She'll never give it to us. Tina's smile widened. Oh, she won't have to. For the next hour, I watched my wife work. It wasn't hacking, not really. The HOA bylaws stipulated residents had the right to review security footage related to incidents on their property. She logged into the clunky resident portal and requested the archive from the day of the incident. A message popped up. File not found. This footage has been deleted. I slumped. Of course. She erased it. Deleted? Yes, Tina said, her eyes gleaming. But erased? Nothing is ever truly erased. She opened a new window, a black screen with blinking green text. She explained that while Carol could delete the video file, the server kept a log of every administrator action. It was a digital footprint. And Carol was clumsy with technology. Tina's fingers danced over the keys. Then she stopped. Got it. On the screen, the server log showed it plain as day, deleted by admin C. Jenkins at 5:35 p.m. The timestamp was less than an hour after the police had left. Carol hadn't just deleted the footage. She had done it immediately. A clear act of evidence spoliation. Tina took a screenshot, saved it securely, and printed hard copies. This, she said, holding up the paper, is the receipt. It's proof she actively destroyed evidence. The rage in my chest morphed into something cold and focused. This was a new level of dirty. It was a cover-up. We had her, or at least a piece of her. The fines kept coming. A notice for lawn discoloration, where the lemonade spilled. A warning for unauthorized vehicle maintenance because I'd left my hood open. We paid none of them. Instead, Tina drafted a formal, legally precise letter to the HOA board, officially disputing the fines and requesting the server logs related to the footage deletion. We sent it via certified mail. The response was silence. Carol was ignoring us. but the neighborhood tension was palpable. People gave us sympathetic looks or quiet thumbs up. They were scared of Carol, but they were on our side. The peace of Grandison Estates was a fragile illusion, and Carol Jenkins had shattered it. One night, taking out the trash, I saw her watching me from her window. The hatred radiating from her was palpable. It was clear this was escalating. She had tried to run down my son, tried to bury us in paper, and was now destroying evidence. My blood ran cold, wondering what she would try next. A week passed in a state of Cold War. Our newspaper went missing. We'd find small piles of garbage on our lawn. It was petty, childish intimidation. I documented everything, adding to the growing Carol file on Tina's server. I wanted to confront her, but Tina insisted we stick to the plan. Let her keep digging her own grave, Jim. Every one of these things is another shovel full of dirt. The nudge came on a Tuesday. I was loading yard waste into my beat-up but reliable old pickup. Selvin, who loves anything with an engine, was in the passenger seat playing with his action figures. I told him I'd be right back, that I needed to grab my wallet. I was inside for no more than 3 minutes. When I returned, my blood turned to ice. A massive tow truck was backing into my driveway, its yellow lights flashing. The driver, a burly man with a bored expression, was hooking up my pickup. Kelvin was still inside, his face pressed against the window, looking small and scared. I sprinted down the driveway. "Hey, what are you doing?" "My son is in there." The driver glanced at me. "Can't help you, pal." "Got a work order." He jerked a thumb toward a clipboard. I snatched the paper. It was a vehicle removal order for an abandoned and inoperable vehicle parked in violation of HOA covenants. The order was signed in a familiar spiky scroll. Carol Jenkins, President, Grandison Estates HOA. My truck wasn't abandoned. It wasn't inoperable. And the covenant was for street parking. My truck was in my own driveway. It was a complete fabrication. "This is illegal." I shouted, my voice shaking. "You can't tow my truck from my private property on this fraudulent order, and my child is inside." The driver shrugged. "Look, buddy, my job is to hook and book. You got a problem. Take it up with your HOA. Now get your kid out before I lift it." He moved toward the hydraulic controls. A red haze descended over my vision. This was about my son, terrified in a vehicle about to be hoisted into the air. I moved faster than I thought possible, planting myself between the driver and the controls. "You are not touching those controls," I said, my voice dangerously low. "Unhook my truck, now." The driver was bigger than me. He puffed out his chest. "You want to get arrested for interfering. Back off. Move that truck with my kid inside, and it's kidnapping. Your plates and company are on camera. Call the cops. I'll be the one pressing charges." I held my phone up, finger over the 911 button. I saw a flicker of doubt in his eyes. He was just a guy doing a job. He didn't sign up for a kidnapping charge. He looked from my face to the pickup, where Kelvin was now crying. His facade crumbled. "Fine," he grumbled. "Whatever. It ain't worth the paperwork." He stomped back, unfastened the chains, and threw them onto his truck. He snatched the work order, tore it in half, and threw the pieces on the ground. "Tell your crazy HOA lady to lose my number," he muttered, climbing into his cab and speeding off. I rushed to the pickup and wrenched open the door. Kelvin fell into my arms, sobbing. I held him tight, my heart pounding. I looked across the street at the Jenkins house. The curtains in the front window twitched shut. She had been watching. This was a direct, calculated attack using my son as a pawn. The line had been crossed. The question was no longer about peace versus justice. It was about survival. The tow truck incident was a declaration of total war. Carol had shown she was willing to endanger my child. Tina and I sat at the kitchen table late into the night, the Carol file open between us. We had photos, the server log screenshot, and the torn to order. But we were still playing defense. "She's escalating, Jim," Tina said, her voice quiet but steely. "She's not just trying to annoy us into moving anymore. She's trying to break us. What's next?" Her question hung in the air, heavy and ominous. We didn't wait long for the answer. 2 days later, a polite, professionally dressed woman with a kind but weary face knocked on our door. She introduced herself as Miss Albright from Child Protective Services. My stomach plummeted. Tina's hand found mine and squeezed tightly. "We received an anonymous tip," Miss Albright said, consulting her notes. It alleged child neglect, an unsafe living environment, and reports of a violent, unstable father. The words were so ludicrous I could only stare. This was Carol's next move. She had failed to get me arrested, failed to intimidate us with fines, failed to seize my property. Now she was trying to have my son taken away. It was the lowest, most despicable thing imaginable. Before I could speak, Tina stepped forward, a picture of serene confidence. "Miss Albright, please come in. I'm Tina. This is my husband, Jim. Our son, Kelvin, is in the living room. Can I get you some iced tea?" The social worker, expecting confrontation, was taken aback. She stepped inside, her eyes scanning our clean, safe, cookie-scented home. Tina orchestrated a masterclass in calm, evidence-based rebuttal. She showed her the stocked pantry, Kelvin's bright room, and then sat her down at the table with the laptop. "Let me provide some context for this anonymous tip," Tina said, her voice even. She walked her through the entire saga. The doorbell camera video of the SUV, the picture of my bruised hands, the bogus fines, the garbage, the illegal tow order, the instability this tipper mentioned, Tina said, clicking on a photo of me holding a sobbing Kelvin after the tow truck left, is the natural reaction of a father protecting his child from a clear and present danger. Miss Albright's professional mask gave way to dawning horror. She had come to investigate a troubled family and was leaving with evidence of a malicious, pathological vendetta. She spoke with Kelvin alone, hearing his happy chatter about his Lego castle. When she returned, her face was set. "Mr. and Mrs. Pard," she said, closing her notepad, "I've seen more than enough. This tip is baseless and malicious. I'm closing the case as unfounded. I'll be filing a report about the misuse of our services. Filing a false report with CPS is a serious offense." She paused at the door, sympathetic. "I'm truly sorry you're going through this. My advice: don't back down." After she left, we stood in silence. The immediate threat was gone, but the violation lingered. Carol had attacked the very heart of our family. Kelvin came over and wrapped his arms around my waist. "Is that lady going to take me away?" he asked, his voice trembling. I knelt and hugged him tighter than ever before. "Never, buddy, never." Over his head I met Tina's eyes. The look we shared was one of grim, absolute resolve. The time for defense was over. The time for playing by the rules Carol ignored was over. She had tried to burn down our world. Now we were going to get the matches. The CPS visit was the final straw. "We have to go on offense," I said that night, pacing. "A full-on scorched earth offense," Tina nodded. "I agree, but a frontal assault is what she'll expect. We need to be smarter. We need to dismantle her power structure from the inside." Her gaze drifted to the HOA directory. "She's the president, but she's not a dictator. There's a board. A treasurer." We looked up the name, Arthur Finch. "A quiet, unassuming accountant who lived on the other side of the neighborhood, known for his prize-winning roses." He seemed the exact opposite of Carol's abrasive personality. "He's our weak link," Tina said. "Or our strongest one. People like Arthur value order and rules. Carol's chaos must be driving him crazy." The next day, I drove to Arthur's house. I found him pruning his roses. He looked up, wary. "Mr. Finch," I started, keeping my voice low. "I'm Jim Part. I need to talk to you about Carol Jenkins." His eyes darted around. "I don't think that's a good idea. Carol, she handles all resident communications." "This isn't about communications, Arthur. This is about fraud, evidence tampering, and child endangerment. And as the board's treasurer, you're complicit." His face went pale. He dropped his clippers. I don't know what you're talking about." "I think you do," I pressed, pulling out my phone. "I think you know about the illegal fines. I think you know she's using HOA funds for personal vendettas. And I have a feeling you're not comfortable with it." I showed him the fraudulent tow order. "Did you approve payment for this, Arthur? That's misappropriation of funds. That's a crime." Arthur swallowed hard. She bullies everyone. She says it's for the community. If anyone questions her, she finds violations on their property. My wife has health problems. We can't afford that stress. It was all there. The classic bully, ruling through fear. I softened my tone. I'm not trying to get you in trouble, Arthur. I'm trying to stop her, and I can't do it without your help. We're not the only ones, are we?" He shook his head miserably. "No, the Potters had to replace their entire fence. The Wilsons were fined $1,000 for a basketball hoop. She waives fines for her friends and triples them for anyone who crosses her." "Fines for favors," I murmured. "And you have the records?" He nodded, a glimmer of defiance in his eyes. "I have everything. Emails where she orders me to waive fines, invoices for her special projects that are just improvements to her property. I have the real budget reports. I kept copies. I knew this day would come. It was the jackpot. The key to her entire corrupt enterprise." "Arthur," I said, looking him straight in the eye, "you have the power to end this. Stand with the bully or stand with your neighbors. Your choice." I gave him a flash drive. "Put everything on this. Drop it in a plain envelope at the library return slot tomorrow. I'll pick it up. She'll never know it was you." He looked at the drive, then at his perfect lawn, a symbol of the quiet life Carol was threatening. He took a deep, shuddering breath and nodded. "Okay," he whispered. "I'll do it." I walked away, adrenaline surging. We had our inside man. We had the evidence. Now we needed the perfect stage. The stage was the semi-annual Grandison Estates HOA meeting. It was Carol's personal platform, but this time it was standing room only. Tina and I had orchestrated our trap with precision. Arthur had delivered a treasure trove of digital dirt, far worse than we imagined. Tina compiled it into a devastating presentation, syncing the multi-angle video of the SUV attack with screenshots of Carol's damning emails and a side-by-side comparison of the fake and real budgets. My job was simpler. I called the Potters, the Wilsons, and others. Word spread. That night, the clubhouse was packed. Carol stood at the podium, basking in the crowd, mistaking it for popularity. She even held up a small device. "And to ensure order," she beamed, "I've brought my personal decibel meter. Any outbursts over 85 decibels will be ruled out of order." A ripple of incredulous laughter went through the crowd. She droned on about lawn care and recycling. Finally, she opened the floor to new business. I stood up. "Carol, I have a presentation for the residents." Before she could object, Tina at the back of the room hit a button. The projector screen flickered to life. The first image was a high-definition, slow-motion shot of Carol's SUV, her enraged face clear through the windshield, bearing down on the lemonade stand. The crowd gasped. Carol spun around, her face ashen. "What is this? Turn that off. This is unapproved." But it was too late. The video continued, showing Kelvin being shoved to safety, me slamming the hood, the stand exploding. Then came the emails, her own words 10 feet high. "Waive the Potters' fine, Arthur. Double the Wilsons' fine." The room buzzed with anger. Carol waved the decibel meter, shrieking for order, but the crowd drowned her out. The final slide was the clincher, the real budget beside the fake, showing thousands skimmed into her pocket. "The dam broke. You used our money to clean your pool," Mr. Potter yelled. "You found me for a basketball hoop while you were stealing from us." Mrs. Wilson screamed. Carol was tracked, cornered in the spotlight. She jabbed the decibel meter at the crowd. "You are all out of order. This meeting is adjourned." But no one listened. At that moment, the back doors opened, and the same 2 police officers stepped in. The older officer walked calmly to the podium. "Carol Jenkins," he said, his voice cutting through the chaos. "You're under arrest for assault with a vehicle, evidence tampering, fraud, and conspiracy." The sight of Carol Jenkins being led out in handcuffs was met with stunned silence, then applause. Her reign was over. Mr. Henderson called for order, and an emergency vote appointed Arthur Finch interim president. The community had taken its first step back to sanity, but our fight wasn't completely over. There was still Chad. The police interviewed him, and while he wasn't facing the same charges, his actions couldn't be ignored. His case went to juvenile court, focused on rehabilitation. We were asked for a victim impact statement, and we decided Kelvin should do it. We talked to him about it, not wanting vengeance but understanding consequences. He agreed to talk to a court counselor. A week later, we went for a mediation session. Brat was there with his defeated-looking father. He wouldn't make eye contact. his sneer replaced by sullen shame, the counselor asked Kelvin to explain how Chad's actions made him feel. My son, in his simple, honest way, was devastatingly effective. "You tried to steal my lemonade," he said, looking directly at Chad. "And when I said no, you got mad and threw the cup on my lawn. It made me feel bad, like all my hard work didn't matter." He took a deep breath. "And then your mom. She broke everything. She scared me." Chad finally looked up, and I saw a flicker of genuine remorse. He was a kid, raised in a toxic environment, taught that intimidation was the way. Without his mother's influence, he seemed lost. Part of his sentence was a formal apology. A few days later, a video file arrived from his lawyer. We gathered around and clicked play. Brad sat in a therapist's office looking nervous. This is for Kelvin Pard," he began. "I wanted to say I'm sorry for what I did at your lemonade stand. It was a stupid thing to do. I was trying to act cool in front of my friends, and I was a jerk. You were just trying to run a business, and I had no right to disrespect that." He paused. "What my mom did, that was wrong. Really wrong. And I'm sorry you got scared. I hope you can forgive me. It wasn't a grand speech, but it felt real." We showed it to Kelvin. He watched intently, then nodded. "Okay," he said. "I forgive him, and for him it was over. He had the capacity for grace. Carol only had an appetite for power." Chad's apology closed a chapter. It was a small but necessary piece of justice. With that tied up, all that remained was the final reckoning for Carol Jenkins. Her day in court was less a trial and more a confirmation of her downfall. With the mountain of evidence against her, her lawyer advised a guilty plea. She hoped for leniency, but the judge, a no-nonsense woman known for being tough on power abuses, was having none of it. Tina and I sat in the front row. Carol stood before the judge in a drab jumpsuit, her arrogance gone, replaced by pale, drawn panic. The judge read the convictions, her voice ringing with finality. Assault with a deadly weapon, child endangerment, evidence tampering, felony fraud, conspiracy. "Miss Jenkins," the judge said, peering over her glasses, "you were entrusted with leadership. You were meant to be a steward. Instead, you twisted that power into a weapon. You bullied, intimidated, and enriched yourself. And when a child stood up to your entitled son, you responded with shocking violence and malice. You didn't just break HOA rules. You broke the law. You shattered your community's peace and endangered a child's life over lemonade. There must be a steep price, and there was." The judge stacked the sentences. The final number was so large it seemed abstract, but the reality was simple. Carol Jenkins would spend the rest of her free years in prison. She crumpled, a guttural sob escaping as the bailiffs led her away. There was no joy, only profound relief. Justice had been served. The epilogue was written a few weeks later on another hot, sunny Saturday. We were back at the end of our driveway. In place of the splintered table stood a brand-new, custom-built lemonade stand. Mr. Henderson, the retired carpenter, had built it for Calvin. It was bright yellow with a striped awning and a professional sign Tina designed. "Kelvin's Legendary Lemonade 1.0. Jokes are still free." The price had doubled, but nobody cared. A line of neighbors stretched down the sidewalk. Arthur Finch was there, looking younger. The Wilsons were there, their son dribbling his basketball. Even Chad Jenkins showed up. He bought a cup and dropped a 20 into the jar. "Good luck with the business," he said, and he sounded like he meant it. "No, Tab," Kelvin said. Chad nodded. At the end of the day, Kelvin counted his earnings, over $300. His eyes were wide. "Dad, I'm rich." Tina knelt beside him. "What do you want to do with it, sweetie?" Kelvin thought. "The park needs a new swing," he said. "The old one is squeaky." So, the money from the first day of the newsstand was donated to the Granderson Estates Community Fund for new park equipment. We had fought for justice and found peace,